The Dominican Republic offers commercial sex with children, as do a number of other places. Once again, it is usually the victims who are treated as criminals. Tens of millions, and that's probably an underestimate, of men in the United States patronize adult bookstores, what we politely call gentlemen's clubs, massage parlors, escort services, and my guess is that the number would peak well over 100 million if you threw in everyone who downloaded pornography on a regular basis. The demand for illegal forced sex in the United States is enormous. The Justice Department tells us, and the Justice Department sometimes can be wrong, but I'll take their number because it serves my purpose, that in order to support the prostitution industry in the United States, there must be 750 million acts of prostitution a year in this country. How many men are there in this country? Now, we all know that some number of them are gay, and we're not talking about homosexual prostitution, we're talking about heterosexual here. We know some of them are 3 and 4 years old. They don't have American Express cards yet. They can't go to a massage parlor. Some of them are in scooters. Not enough Viagra in the world is going to get them there. So that leaves about 70 or 80 million of them. Who are they? Well, husbands, boyfriends, brothers, daddy, grandpa, none of whom have ever been to a prostitute. Ask them sometime. Next time you're at a family gathering, ask for a show of hands. Uncle Jake, maybe, will say. Yeah, I do that. There's a word for that. The word is liar. It is not possible. The industry and the market is enormous. And the amount of self-deception involved is similarly enormous. Human trafficking is a lucrative criminal market. The reason it's so lucrative, particularly for organized crime, which is why I got interested in it, is humans are great because you can reuse them. You can sell them over and over and over again. You can sell forced labor, illegal migrants, to a tobacco farmer in Kentucky, and then to a tomato farmer in Florida, and then to a cranberry picker in Maine. You get paid 3 times. You can move a woman from a massage parlor in New Jersey to an escort service at Louisville to a porn production site in Cleveland, get paid 3 times, over and over again. Humans are remarkably renewable. Organized crime loves that. It's a constant source of profit. Traffickers come in all shapes and sizes. There are some individual entrepreneurs. They're pretty busy. We got some mom and pop enterprises out there peddling children. And we have some fairly sophisticated organized crime groups doing it. But the bottom line is this. None of it is possible without a high degree of collusion with officials in the United States who are facilitating illegal human trafficking. Back a few years ago, the CIA did a very nice little policy analysis of what they knew about human trafficking. I was stunned when I read it. They flat out said this is impossible without widespread corruption in the federal government, particularly in immigration, naturalization, and customs. I was stunned. They hardly ever admit what's obvious. That's obvious. The Immigration and Naturalization Service reports that traffickers have corrupted senior enforcement personnel, such as immigration officials at airports, consular workers in U.S. embassies abroad, members of law enforcement, officers at border checkpoints. There are ongoing corrupt relationships between public officials, private business, and human traffickers across the board. Corrupt public officials are accepting bribes for visas, accepting bribes for passports, for safe transit, and elected officials are accepting bribes for citizenship, which can be granted by a resolution of Congress. In every area of organized crime, whether it's drugs, human trafficking, doesn't matter what it is, corruption is a lubricant. Corruption is the thing that allows the business to run smoothly. Corruption is essential. In this case, corruption is more than essential. Let me give you one more example of that before I move on. When we traffic children to the United States for sexual slavery, the typical modality used by traffickers is to simply put them on a commercial air flight. And no one intervenes. No one asks the child what they're doing. No one interferes with the process of a child boarding a Delta flight in Bangkok and coming to San Francisco. Not the government, not the airline, no one. It is so open and so obvious that we simply refuse to see it. Illegal immigrants, migrants, folks who are trafficked, fall victim to inhumane conditions and inhumane treatment. They suffer immensely. Some traffickers have thrown people all overboard on boats because they complain too much. It's an effective way to stop them. Violence, intimidation, and brutality are especially common among those trafficked to the sex industry. Typical tactics involve repeated rapes, cutting off fingers, sexual assault, rapes in front of other people, rapes on the phone with the family listening, family back in the home country, death threats, and beatings. In the economy of human trafficking, demand is enormously high. The risk of punishment and capture is minuscule, is very low. And like most other criminal markets, human trafficking is driven by demand. The Colombians wouldn't traffic cocaine to the United States if there wasn't an enormous demand for cocaine in the United States. If 27.3 million of your fellow citizens annually did not illegally use cocaine. That's the government's number. I think the real number is higher. There would be no one trafficked to the United States for forced labor or sexual servitude if we didn't want them to be trafficked here. In Florida, the Immigration and Naturalization Service tells us that tonight there are at least 350,000 trafficked folks from other countries living in forced labor on farms. Sweatshops in the sun is what they call them. Farmers prefer illegal workers. They don't complain. But if they do complain, they complain in a language the farmer can't understand. They'll accept low wages. They'll do jobs that no one else will do. None of you want a job cleaning up after the chickens, do you? And they have nowhere to go. They have no way to escape. Economic and political globalization is causing dramatic changes worldwide that make the problem even worse. We were told globalization would be great. We'd all get cheaper, and we didn't. We'd all make more money, and we didn't. In fact, the gap between the rich and the poor in industrial societies, in affluent societies like the United States and Western Europe, got greater. Your salaries got less, at least in terms of what they would buy. The gap between the rich and the poor in the third world got enormous, and the gap between rich countries and poor countries became a chasm. And the cheap stuff you were promised turned out to be even more cheap and more dangerous than we thought in the beginning. We have dramatic increases around the world in the number of unemployed folk, in the number of working poor, and those in extremely vulnerable employment situations. In the next year, 200 million workers, people working, not unemployed, working, will be forced into poverty in the developing economies.